Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
But let's talk about the practical impact of this. So, I posted this, your piece on LinkedIn, and there was somebody who was arguing, you still need to do review gating because most, the people that are really motivated to write reviews are the critics and the haters. And in order to get balance, you've got to do selective solicitation of positive reviews. And Mike, you previously talked about a study you did at GatherUp about the impact of review gating on average scores. Can you give us a little sense of that?
I guess it was 2017, 2018, Google declared that gating was verboten. We switched several large groups of businesses over one day to the next. So we had 10,000 insurance agents that were gating based, and then they stopped. And what we found was very interesting, that average review ratings hardly changed the year before compared to the year after. In other words, it was 4.6 rating across these 10,000 locations the year before, 4.61, and maybe 4.59 after. Statistically insignificant difference with or without gating. So it didn't affect whether the negative people were going to leave reviews or not. My contention is if they're that unhappy, they're going to go around your gating system and leave a review at Google anyways. Secondly, though, we saw review volume increase dramatically by almost 50 or 60%. I think it went from 35,000 to 65,000. Maybe that's almost 100% total reviews during equivalent periods. Now, some of that review increase could be due to just reviews taking off in the marketplace, but a lot of it was due to the smoother path that consumers had to leave a review. So no real impact on ratings. So the idea that somehow a business can prevent people from leaving negative reviews is really wrongheaded. And I think consumers are aware of this. I had a friend call me who had gotten cheated in a housing roofing deal. And I looked at the reviews. The reviews were stellar. He had looked at them. They were stellar. And I thought, well, maybe the guy is buying fake reviews. I ran him through Curtis's product, which is called Transparency Report. And it said, no, the reviews were legitimate. So then I went through the vendor's review process, and he was gating, right? So he did manage to get good reviews, mostly 5 stars instead of 3 and 4 star. And he was gating at a fairly high number. And my contention is that, it may help a little bit if you've got bad service, but it's much better to fix the service than to deal with that kind of duplicity, because the vendor's going to get sued regardless.
So you could argue most small businesses are not going to know anything about this decision or these new guidelines, let alone pay attention to them and change their behavior in reaction to them. But what do we think is going to happen in the market? I mean, this is a big deal, at least conceptually. Is anything going to change meaningfully in the market in terms of how people approach reviews?
I think so, because I think the review platforms are vulnerable. Yotpo was very lucky they got off with a hand slap. And I think it's going to be relatively easy for the FTC to investigate review platforms. And if they find that, like they did with Yotpo, that the star rating and sentiment filters provided its clients with the means and instrumentalities to easily and deceptively suppress negative product reviews and mislead consumers. If they find that, then they're going to go after those review platforms. And I believe that these review platforms are responsible for a lot of the reviews that are happening. So I do believe that
at the enterprise level, certainly.
At the enterprise level.
Not at the SMB level.
Well, once you get above one location, it becomes very difficult to run your own review management program, maybe 5 locations. But so I think they'll change. They're going to have to change. They cannot make it too easy to deceptively suppress reviews. So I think there will be some change at that level. And then it's going to be in their interest to promote the ideal of ethical review behavior. I mean, this was always an approach we took at GatherUp. We tried to be in compliance with all the rules, and we used it as a marketing advantage. And I think that these review companies will have to take that bent Otherwise, they're exposed. And anybody who's using those companies, as we saw with Yatpo and Fashion Nova, is exposed once the FTC starts investigating.
Final question,
so
Mike. Final question is: do you see review gating or sort of cherry picking reviews, which this new ruling puts the kibosh on? Do you see that as a bigger problem, or do you see buying fake reviews as a bigger problem?
Yeah, I see buying fake reviews at Google as a much bigger problem because most reviews are seen at Google, not at the website. So it's easy to suppress reviews on your website. But it isn't easy to suppress reviews at Google. And I see the bigger problem at Google, and which is what I pointed out to them. It's like these rules, and the same with incentives. These rules apply to only 10% of the review views in the world when the consumer comes to your website. 90% are happening at Google, and that's where regulation needs to take place as well.
Yeah, so. Just a quick reminder in the report Curtis and I did when I was at Uberall comparing Google, Yelp, Facebook, and TripAdvisor. Google had the most fake reviews. It was about 11%, if I remember correctly, of their reviews, which could be as many as 200 million reviews, depending on what the total corpus is, if you can extrapolate. So it's a big problem and across a lot of categories, and certain categories it was above 20%. 11% was the average.
I mean, I am not sanguine about the future of consumer reviews, given the inability of the FTC to broadly enforce, the unwillingness of Google to improve their filters.
Or Amazon.
Amazon is a
just
particular
as big,
problem.
if not bigger problem there.
Yeah. Right. It's a terrible problem in Amazon.
Right. I am not optimistic about the future of reviews, and I love reviews, and I would hate to see that.
Well, they have been enormously valuable to consumers, and it's been a really important, of the last decade or so, it's been a really important feature of the local consumer experience, and it's just really a shame that it's gotten so polluted now, and there really isn't an alternative that exists. I mean, in the product space, you can use things like the Wirecutter or particular editorial rundowns of products, but in the services arena, there's really no substitute for consumer reviews unless you're getting a personal recommendation from some online word of mouth equivalent.
So just the nod that the FTC made to that problem of fake reviews is in their guidance for platforms in the publication section, point 5, they say, have reasonable procedures to identify fake or suspicious reviews after publication. If a consumer or business tells you a review may be fake, investigate and take appropriate action. That may include taking down suspicious or phony reviews, leaving them up with appropriate labels, issuing an alert about them, and addressing the issue with those responsible for them. Now, because these platforms like Google and perhaps even GatherUp are protected by Section 230, the FTC is very limited in any punitive action they can take if these reviews are left up unchanged against Google, for example. There's really no action they can take, but it does give them some room to at least insist that they try to follow this guideline. Now, again, a guideline isn't a rule from the FTC's point of view. A guideline is just sort of the general consensus, a recommendation, and it may precede a rule, but rulemaking is complicated and expensive. The question is whether the FTC, the group that leads the FTC, these 3 Democrats and 2 Republicans, care enough about reviews to invest in rulemaking.
Well, on that point, I watched the Lena Khan, chair of the FTC, interview on CNBC. It was very interesting. It was mostly about antitrust. But one of the points that she made over and over is that they have very limited resources. They have a lot of things in front of them they're dealing with. And so their ability to go after all the rule breakers and infractions and abuses in the marketplace is quite limited. And so as a consequence of that, I think what we're going to see is you point out that the platforms are vulnerable, and that's probably where they'll spend their time and energy. But they really are trying to create deterrence examples that, get other people to stop the bad behavior rather than prosecuting the villains that are out there. And I think the fake reviews problem, Google has to decide that it wants to take this seriously. I mean, they already sort of maintain that they do, but in order for there to be real progress, or Amazon, the big platforms have to decide that they want to clean it up, and they don't, as you point out, 230 immunizes them against liability, so they don't really have any incentive to do that.
I guess I got out of the review space at the right time. Huh?
Well, no, I mean, your example of the ethical review platform, I think, is important. It's really important for ethical companies to be in the market and to be alternatives to these other guys, the black hats. All right, David, any final thoughts on any of this stuff?
No. Have a great weekend or week, depending on when you're listening, and join us next week for episode 50.
Yes.
The big 5-0.
We'll have birthday cake.
That's right.
Or something. All right, bye-bye.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.